Amelia Earhart set off to fly around the world and was never seen again, unless a lost photograph proves otherwise. A logger in Arizona claims he was taken aboard a UFO and returned days later, and an Australian man disappeared for 20 years, only to reappear with no memory of his past life. These are more disturbing cases of people who vanished and returned from another reality. Amelia Earhart's disappearance is one of the most famous unsolved mysteries of all time. In 1937, she set off on a mission to become the first woman to fly around the world. But on July 2nd, her plane vanished somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. The last radio transmission from her reported she was running low on fuel near Howland Island, and then nothing. The massive search that followed turned up nothing, and Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan were declared lost at sea. That's the official story, but over the years, people have reported strange sightings and theories that suggest she might not have died in a crash. Some claim she was captured by the Japanese and held as a prisoner of war. Others believe she assumed a new identity and lived out her days in secrecy. Some claim to have actually spotted her with their own eyes. And in 2017, a supposed long-lost photograph surfaced from US military archives and was shared online. Some said there was a woman looking a lot like Earhart and a man who could be Noonan on a dock in the Marshall Islands. In Sydney, Australia, 1987, Gabriel Nagy went out to run errands like any normal day. He even called his wife Pamela, saying that he'd be home for lunch, but he never showed up. Pamela called the police, and soon after, a disturbing discovery was made. Gabriel's car was found burned out on the side of the road, and there was no sign of Gabriel himself. There was a massive search, but the case quickly went cold. That is, until 2 weeks later, when police discovered someone had withdrawn money from Gabriel's account over 100 miles away. But after that, the trail went dead again for 20 years. Right before Gabriel was about to be declared legally dead, one final search by a determined constable led to a shocking discovery. A man in Mackay had recently undergone surgery. His name was Ron Saunders, but hospital records showed that he also went by Gabriel Nagy. When authorities contacted him, he told them that he had barely remembered the last 2 decades. He'd been living on the streets, doing odd jobs with only fragments of memory from his past life. Doctors suspected that he'd suffered severe head trauma in the accident that burned out his car, leading to a rare case of amnesia. But something didn't quite add up. If he still knew his name, why hadn't he tried to find his family? Why not contact the police? Well, whatever the answer, the family was reunited in the end. What would you do if you realized your work could be used for something catastrophic? In the case of Italian physicist Ettore Majorana, he might have chosen to vanish. In 1938, Majorana, a brilliant scientist working on cutting-edge atomic research, boarded a ship from Palermo to Naples, but when the ship arrived, he was nowhere to be found. Witnesses confirmed that he'd gotten on the boat, but no one saw him get off. There were no reports of foul play either, and the weather had been calm. For years, people wondered if he'd been kidnapped, killed, fled into hiding. It wasn't until 2011 that a new clue finally came about. A photograph taken in Argentina in the 50s of a man who looked exactly like Majorana. Facial recognition experts found 10 points of similarity, meaning it was very likely him, but he barely looked like he'd aged. The leading theory is that Majorana, realizing his work on neutrinos could be used for nuclear weapons, deliberately disappeared. Some believe he may have even worked on early atomic research before realizing the implications and choosing to disappear and start over. But to this day, we still can't say for sure. On May 25th, 1985, police in Aurora, Colorado were called to a shopping mall about a woman in distress. She had no ID, no memory of who she was, and was carrying only an empty notepad and a car key. She was taken to a hospital where she spent 4 months trying to piece together her past, even reaching out to local news outlets for help, but nothing turned up. With no answers, she decided to start fresh. She changed her name to Jane D and moved to Alaska, where she built a whole new life, marrying, having 2 sets of twins, and settling down. 12 years passed, and that's when a co-worker of hers happened to see a news broadcast from Seattle about a missing woman named Jody Roberts. The photo was unmistakable. Jane D was Jody Roberts. an investigative journalist who had disappeared from Washington State in 1985. But what happened? How had she completely forgotten who she was? Long-term amnesia this severe is usually caused by extreme trauma or an epileptic event. Roberts had no history of epilepsy, and before vanishing, she'd emptied her bank account and taken her cats to a shelter. It looked like she'd planned to disappear, but to this day, the truth's never come out. She still goes by Jane D and is intensely private a person, not interested in speaking to the press. She has no social media. Does make you wonder though, if something happened, something to do with her journalism job that made her feel the need to get away. A man named Russ Kellett from North Yorkshire, England, came out with some pretty wild claims a few years back, and when various news sites told his story online, some people just memed the hell out of him, others were absolutely giddy. The story is pretty insane, but it is also pretty entertaining, and I'll just say, I'd love it to be real. So Kellett says that he's been taken by aliens at least 60 times. That's 60. Starting when he was just a boy. He describes waking up in a strange tunnel-like space, then finding himself on an operating table surrounded by towering Dracula-like beings who pumped a mysterious liquid into his body, supposedly turning him into a super soldier. For over 30 years, Kellett insists he's been part of an alien military force fighting against a race known as the Dragos, massive reptilian creatures with dragon-like heads. He says time moves differently in this war, with 4 hours on Earth equaling 4 years on distant planets, and that he's been battling not just in space, but here on Earth too, in places like the UK, other parts of Europe and South America. He even claims to have been transported through time, using a strange glass sphere inside a room with a chessboard patterned floor, sent to fight in conflicts across the universe. I will just leave it at that. From a now deleted Reddit user comes an odd encounter at a gas station. Back in 2016, I was driving home late at night after visiting a friend. It was a route I knew well, just a long stretch of highway with barely any traffic at that hour. About halfway home, I noticed a gas station up ahead. The thing is, I didn't remember ever seeing one there before. It didn't look new either, it looked old, like straight out of the 80s. Flickering neon lights, a beat up old truck parked out front. It even had an old school gas pump. Well, I needed gas anyway, so I pulled in. Plus, there was just no way I wasn't checking this place out. The moment I stepped out of my car, everything felt off. Inside, there was an old man behind the counter staring at a tiny TV. I asked if they took cards, but he just shook his head. Cash only. I didn't have cash, so I turned around to leave. As soon as I made it back to my car, it struck me just how weird this situation was. An old gas station that I'd never seen before along a stretch of road I'd driven down plenty of times that apparently only took cash. I shuddered a little and then drove home and tried not to think about the experience before writing it down today. Honestly, I still don't know where I stopped that night or maybe even when. In 1975, Travis Walton and his logging crew were driving home after a long day working in the Apache Site-Greaves National Forest when they spotted something very bizarre. A glowing red light hovering over the trees. As they got closer, they saw what looked like a metallic craft suspended in midair. Most people would hit the gas and get out of there, but Walton had other ideas. Ignoring his crew's warnings, he got out of the truck and walked toward it. And that's when a beam of light shot down from the craft, knocking him off his feet, lifting him into the air. That was enough for the rest of the crew. They panicked and sped off. Guilt quickly set in though, and they decided to turn back. But when they returned a few minutes later, Walton was gone. A massive search followed, but no sign of Walton turned up for 5 days. Suddenly though, he reappeared. Confused and disoriented, he ended up telling everyone eventually that he'd been taken aboard a UFO, where he encountered strange beings that seemed to be experimenting on him. He claimed he managed to fight them off and escape deeper into the ship before waking up on the side of the road with no idea how much time had passed. The case became one of the most well-documented alien abduction stories in history, probably, especially since Walton and his crew all passed multiple polygraph tests. This next case, often referred to as the friendship case, might not fit the typical missing person story. but it's got a weird, unsettling angle that connects to the idea of people vanishing, at least temporarily, and coming back with some pretty wild stories. It's not going to go where you think it's going to go. So during a stretch of time between the 1950s and 60s, a group of people in Italy claimed that they were regularly in contact with extraterrestrial beings. They were supposedly peaceful, highly advanced, and deeply invested in guiding humanity toward a better future. According to those involved, the aliens would take them to hidden bases on Earth, sharing advanced knowledge about science and spirituality, and the importance of unity. Some claim to have spent significant time with these beings, and as if this whole thing wasn't strange enough, some believe that in the course of these interactions, a few of the humans may have gotten a little too close to their extraterrestrial friends, possibly leading to the birth of alien-human hybrids. Now, obviously, this is a pretty nutty case, no pun intended, but if this story is to be believed, we've got a situation where ordinary people vanished, at least for short periods, and were taken to who knows where. Apparently, though, they came back changed. This next story comes from another now deleted Reddit user and goes as follows. In 2019, I went on a solo hiking trip in Washington. It was a well-traveled trail, nothing dangerous. I planned to camp overnight and head back the next morning. Around 1 p.m., I set up camp in a clearing, and that's when things got weird. I noticed that the forest was silent. There were no birds to be heard, no wind, just this heavy stillness. The sky had also changed. It wasn't dark, but the light had this washed out grayish tint. I was uneasy at this point, but decided it just wasn't enough to get too freaked out about. Maybe a storm was coming. Well, then about an hour later, I heard the voices, muffled like a bad recording of human speech. I stuck my head out of my tent expecting to see someone, but the clearing was empty. Now, I must have fallen asleep soon after this because I don't remember much after that. But when I woke up, the clearing looked different. The trees seemed taller, the air was heavy. At this point, I was just freaked out and decided it was time to head home. Thing is, the trail was missing. At least I couldn't find it. I walked for hours in the direction I'd come, but I never seemed to get anywhere. It was actually getting dark now. Finally, I made it out though and reached my car. I checked the time, and that's when I lost it. Less than 2 hours had passed. This was impossible. I could have sworn I was out there for 5 hours. Well, I haven't gone down that trail since, and I never will again. In August of 1976, 4 friends set out for a camping trip in the Allagash wilderness in Maine, hoping for some peaceful time away. But things took a strange turn when they spotted a bright light in the sky on their second night, which then quickly disappeared. 2 nights later, the same light appeared again, only this time it was much more intense. In fact, they described it looking almost like the sun. As they watched, it followed them along the water. One of the men, Charlie, tried to signal SOS using his flashlight, and that's when the light shot a beam toward him. When they returned to camp, everything felt off. The fire they'd left burning was out, and they were completely drained as if hours had passed. Days went by without any other strange sightings, but when the men got home, they began having these unsettling dreams, all of them similar and terrifying. It wasn't until 1988 that they finally sought help from UFO researcher Ray Fowler and decided to undergo hypnosis. Under hypnosis, they all recalled being abducted by aliens, terrifying creatures who performed medical exams on them and even took their skin and bodily fluids. What was most chilling was that each of their stories matched almost perfectly, and they even passed polygraph tests. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.